So we need to talk about something that's been bothering me for a while. And I'm saying this as someone who grew up online, someone who lived through Tumblr, Pinterest, sad edits, black and white quotes, all of it. There's this obsession, this desire to be sad, not just to feel sad, that's human, but to perform sadness, to make it aesthetic, to make it beautiful. And honestly, it's weird, it's fascinating, and it's kind of terrifying. So today we are going to unpack it properly. No sugarcoating, no pretending it's just a vibe. We're going to talk about why the internet romanticizes misery, why people cling to sadness like it's a personality trait, and why so many of us, maybe even you, feel more comfortable being sad than happy. So let's start with the obvious. Sadness becomes an aesthetic. And I don't mean people posted emotional quotes, I mean sadness becomes a brand. Tumblr basically invented a tragically beautiful girl. You know the one. Soft lighting, messy hair, cigarette, she doesn't actually smoke, staring out a rainy window like she's in a French film. Sadness wasn't just an emotion, it was a look. And the internet, they ate it up. Because here's the thing, sadness is easy to aestheticize. It's slow, it's quiet, it's dramatic, and it photographs well. Happiness is loud and messy. Sadness is cinematic. And the internet loves cinematic. Here's where it gets interesting. Because it's not just that sadness looks pretty, it's that people want it. Not consciously, not like, yay, depression! But subconsciously, sadness gives people something. Let me explain. We live in a world where everyone wants to seem deep, mysterious, complicated, like they've lived through something. And sadness, especially aesthetic sadness, gives you that instantly. You don't need life experience, you don't need emotional maturity, all you need is a moody playlist and a quote like, I don't want to be happy. Boom, instant depth. Happiness takes effort. You have to build a life, you have to try, you have to risk failing. Sadness asks for nothing. You can sit in a room, put on a sad playlist, and feel like the world is happening to you instead of you having to participate in it. It's passive, it's comfortable, it's familiar. And familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar joy. Let's be honest, sad content performs. A video titled How to Be Happy gets ignored. A video titled I'm Falling Apart gets millions of views. The algorithm doesn't care about your well-being, it cares about engagement, and sadness engages. Now, this is the part nobody talks about. When you're young, especially a teenager, you're still figuring out who you are. And if sadness becomes your identity, you cling to it. Because if you stop being sad, who are you? This is why so many people online subconsciously protect their sadness. They don't want to lose it. It's part of their personality now. And that's dangerous. Because sadness is supposed to be a feeling, not a lifestyle. Let's talk about fandoms. Because if there is any place where emotional suffering gets turned into a group project, it's fandom culture. And I'm not dragging anyone, I'm literally just observing. Think about how many characters are loved because they're broken. Not because they're strong, not because they're kind, not because they're energetic or tragic. People latch onto characters who are traumatized, lonely, self-destructive, or doomed, and then they project that energy onto themselves. Suddenly, being emotionally stable feels boring. Being okay feels flat. Being healthy feels like you're missing the plot. Fandoms don't just celebrate pain, they elevate it. They turn it into symbolism, into poetry, into identity. And once you start seeing yourself as a tragic character, it becomes very hard to step out of that role. Then TikTok came along and said, what if we took all that and made it faster? And suddenly, sadness wasn't just an aesthetic, it was a trend cycle. You've got sad edits, trauma dumping disguised as storytelling, soft girl breakdowns, crying filters, depressive humor, I'm not okay but I'm fine memes, And those videos where someone stares into the camera like they're in a music video about heartbreak they didn't actually experience. TikTok didn't invent sadness, but it did turn it into content, and content spreads. Especially when it's emotional, especially when it's dramatic, especially when it feels like a confession. The problem is, though, not all of it is a confession. Some of it is performance, some of it is exaggeration, some of it is straight up fiction, but the algorithm doesn't care. It just pushes whatever gets a reaction. Here's something people don't admit. Sadness gives you social power online. Not real power, not healthy power, but attention power. If you post that you're thriving, people scroll. If you post that you're falling apart, people stop and like, hold on a minute. They comment, they check in, they share, they relate. And suddenly, sadness becomes a way to feel seen. Not because people want pity, but because they want connection. And the internet has made suffering one of the easiest ways to get it. But that creates a very dangerous incentive. If being okay gets you ignored, and being miserable gets you noticed, what do you think people will lean into? There is a phenomenon, a new phenomenon, I call breakdown culture. It's when people present their lowest moments like they're part of a curated brand. Crying on camera, filming panic attacks, recording voice notes, mid-spiral, posting screenshots of private meltdowns. And again, I'm not judging anyone for struggling. Struggling is human. But the moment you turn breakdown into content, something shifts. It stops being a moment. It becomes a performance. And once you perform something, you start repeating it. Not always intentionally, sometimes subconsciously, because you've learned that vulnerability gets reward. But real vulnerability isn't meant to be packaged, it's meant to be lived. When you make pain look beautiful, you hide the reality of it. Real sadness isn't aesthetic, it's messy, it's confusing, it's exhausting. It's not something you'd ever want to photograph. But online sadness, it's edited, filtered, color graded, paired with a song that makes it feel meaningful. And that's the danger. People start craving the feeling of cinematic sadness instead of recognizing the reality of emotional suffering. It's not that people want to be depressed, it's that they want the version of sadness that looks poetic. But that version doesn't exist in real life. One of the strangest things about online sadness is how it gets packaged as relatable. Not real relatability, not the kind where you talk to a friend and say, yeah, I felt that too. I mean the manufactured kind. The kind where people exaggerate their emotions because they know that it will make strangers feel connected to them. Relatability has become a performance metric. Creators don't just share their lives, they curate the parts that will get the strongest emotional reaction. And sadness is one of the easiest emotions to replicate on camera. You don't need a script, you don't need a setup, you just need a moment of silence, a shaky breath, and a caption that says something like, I don't know how much longer I can pretend that I'm okay. Even if the person is fine, 5 minutes later, the internet doesn't see that. It only sees the moment that it gets posted. And that moment becomes the whole story. Online spaces work like mirrors. Whatever emotion you put into them gets reflected back at you, multiplied. If you post something sad, the comments validate it. If you post something hopeless, people echo it. If you post something dramatic, the algorithm amplifies it. And suddenly, you're surrounded by people who feel the same way, or at least say they do. That creates an echo chamber, where sadness feels normal, expected, encouraged. And when you're surrounded by people who are all performing the same emotion, it becomes harder to recognize what you actually feel. You start absorbing the mood of the room, even if the room is digital. Another thing that's happened online is the rise of emotional distance, disguised as vulnerability. People talk about their feelings, but in a detached way. Like they're narrating someone else's life. They'll say things like, she realized she wasn't enough. They stopped trying. He became numb. But they're talking about themselves. It's a way to express emotion without actually confronting it. A way to feel open without being exposed. And the internet rewards that style, the poetic distance, the third-person sadness, the diary energy entry. It feels intimate, but it's actually a shield. This part is uncomfortable, but it's real. Online suffering becomes competitive. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but subtly. Someone posts about feeling low. Someone else replies with something worse. Another person adds something even heavier. And suddenly, it's a chain of people trying to outsad each other. Not because they want to win. It's only because they want to be heard. Pain becomes a way to prove that you belong. A way to show that you are part of a group. A way to validate your existence in a space where attention is currency. But suffering shouldn't be competition. And it definitely should not be a badge of honor. There's a new trend online where people talk about feelings nothing. Not sadness, not anger, just nothing. And it gets treated like a personality trait. People make jokes about being numb. They turn it into edits, they turn it into a vibe. But emotional numbness isn't a vibe. It's a sign that something inside you is shutting down. The problem is that when numbness becomes normalized, people start recognizing it as something worth addressing. It just becomes another aesthetic, another mood board, another caption, another trend. And that's dangerous because numbness isn't poetic, it's a warning sign. The thing people don't realize is how different online emotions is from real life emotion. Online you can pause, you can edit, you can delete, I can splice these clips together as much as I wanted to. You can re-record the exact moment that you want people to see. Real life doesn't give you that luxury. Online sadness is controlled. Real sadness is unpredictable. Online sadness is curated. Real sadness is chaotic. Online sadness is shared with thousands, and real sadness is silent. And when people spend too long in their online version, they start expecting their real emotions to behave the same way. Neat, poetic, dramatic, meaningful. But real emotions don't follow an aesthetic, they just happen. There's a quiet pressure online to have a tragic backstory. Not because people want trauma, but because they feel like they need a dramatic origin story to justify who they are. It's like the internet has convinced everyone that being ordinary isn't enough. That you need a wound to be interesting. That you need a scar to be valid. That you need a dark chapter to be worth listening to. But that mindset traps people. It makes them feel like their life, it has to be painful in order for it to have any meaning at all. And that is simply not true. A lot of people cling to sadness because they're scared of being boring. Happiness feels simple. Stability feels plain. Peace feels empty. But that's only because the internet has trained us to expect constant emotional stimulation. If you're not suffering, you're not interesting. If you're not spiraling, you're not relatable. If you're not posting something dramatic, you're invisible. But real life isn't supposed to be a highlight of breakdowns. It's allowed to be calm, it's allowed to be steady, it's allowed to be normal. Normal isn't boring, normal is healthy. If the internet is going to stop romanticizing sadness, the shift has to start with honesty. Not performative honesty, not aesthetic honesty, actual honesty. Honesty that says, I'm struggling, but I don't want this to define me. Or, I'm okay and that doesn't make me less interesting. Or even, I don't need to be tragic to be worth listening to. The internet doesn't need less emotion. It needs less performance. People just need to stop feeling like sadness is their only identity. If you've watched this far, thank you, really. This wasn't a video about blaming anyone. It wasn't about shaming people for feeling things. It was about understanding why sadness has become such a powerful force online and why so many of us get caught in it without even realizing. You're allowed to feel things. You're deeply especially. You're allowed to have bad days. You're allowed to struggle. But you're also allowed to be okay. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to want more than a tragic aesthetic. And if nobody's told you this yet, you don't need to be sad to be interesting. You don't need to be broken to be loved. And you do not need to be tragic to be real. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.